Hey everybody, today I am going to be doing a different video than usual. I'm going to be talking about movies I've seen in the last several months, 6 months, 8 months, whatever, that I watched and never got around to review. I actually don't review everything that I watch. There are times, of course, just like anybody, I have friends who want to show me movies and, they're not necessarily on my list of things to review, but I do see them. And they're not new movies necessarily. They can be movies of any time that I just haven't seen before. And so what I thought I would do is just do like a real brief overview of like 3 or 4 movies that I saw that I liked and just combine it all into one video. But before we get into that, I'm going to plug my website. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that's something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. So I will start with a movie. And again, none of these are new and they're just very, very random. But we'll start with the first one. This is a movie called Niagara, and it's an older movie. I watched this on the Criterion channel. It's 1953 and it was directed by Henry Hathaway. And I was surprised that I had actually never seen this film. I knew of it, I just had never seen it. And it's starring Joseph Cotten and Marilyn Monroe. And this is a very campy type of film. And it's definitely dabbling in voyeurism and all that. It feels like Vertigo light, like Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, just not nearly as sophisticated. But yeah, it's like a 1950s reflective piece, but it's taking place in the 1950s. So there's not that much perspective to be had, which I find to be very interesting anytime I see that. But the premise here, it's just a couple on their honeymoon, just a very stereotypical 1950s newlywed couple. And they get roped into this very dramatic situation with another couple that is on vacation, and they're staying at their hotel, and it involves a murder, all this crazy stuff. And that very turbulent couple is played by Marilyn Monroe and Joseph Cotten. And naturally, you have the gorgeous location of Niagara Falls throughout, and which is very interesting as well, because especially at the time, not a lot of movies shot on location like that. And the fact that it was just adds everything to it in terms of the tone. It's all right there. Just epic, wide-spanning landscapes, nature just feeling very vast and very massive, but yet at the same time very eerie. And yet you also have, in contrast to all that massive nature, this picturesque, very quaint image of 1950s living. It's like a postcard, very artificial. When I'm watching the film, it felt very claustrophobic to me, watching these people. It felt very sad, even though nothing sad is really happening on screen. There's something isolating about it, very much like an Edward Hopper painting. And I love the honeymooners. I like the main couple here. The main girl in the film is very perceptive, and she's very strong, and I think like the perfect catalyst to be the springboard for this particular story. And I just love her husband, just because they basically made him as unsexually attractive, basically asexual here. He's not particularly interested in his wife, clearly, and I love just those little touches in the dialogue. It's very important to make this couple very, again, typical, just kind of sexless, because the 1950s was not selling sex in the same way. And then you have this couple over here, Marilyn Monroe, Joseph Cotten, just like this very volatile, sexy sort of thing going on there, and that idealism. Yeah, the film certainly isn't perfect, but I do think that it makes a lot of interesting commentary on the idea of romanticism, how it was perceived at the time, and really how it's still perceived, because I still find it to be quite haunting. And, there's always this, amidst social expectation, there's a potential for a real rush, for real genuine connection, even if it's only for a few moments. And even if it's with a stranger who has done something that is very bad, all the volatility, the sex, the violence, the power of nature is just busting at the surface of this film, and yet never truly breaks through. And yeah, just very interesting, and I find myself thinking about it a lot. And also some very cool cinematic moments in it as well. Another movie that I saw that I had never seen before and always had wanted to see is Cloud Atlas. And this film was directed by the Wachowskis, and it was very interesting. I was so interested in it because of just how ambitious it is. To me, it's one of those, like, this is an unfilmable book, or at least it seemed that way. Because yeah, it's based on a book that is just so incredibly ambitious. You have all these different plots all these different characters connected over multiple eras of time. And the idea of that being a movie just really concerned me, number one, but number two, that that the Wachowskis were going to do it. Oh, that left me with a lot of concerns. But surprisingly, yes, it had plenty of problems. I see it as a very, very flawed movie. And yet at the same time, I was pleasantly surprised with the overall effect of it. I felt like it was able to cohesively translate a lot of the ideas to film in a way that you completely follow it. It's well handled in terms of the cohesion, and that was one of the big things I was worried about. And I think the key there is that you're casting a certain ensemble of actors to start playing multiple people. That is why I think, or at least a huge part of why it works. Also, just in terms of the way that everything was written and structured. And because of that, I think it's really not hard to follow. And all the themes and everything really aren't that complicated when you really look at them. It's really not that hard to follow in the big scheme of things because it doesn't feel convoluted as you think it will, which is kind of a miracle. Yes, of course, throughout the movie I was thinking, well, this should be a mini-series, or it should be a series of films, not just one film, because it feels like a really long montage. It's just not long enough. I want to really sink my teeth into each story a lot more and get really acquainted with the world in a way, get absorbed by it. But no, like I said, it feels montagey and not in the Scorsese type of way, just in a way that makes me feel I'm disconnected from it. And I also would just like to see other directors handle it. I do think the Wachowskis did a very good job here overall, but I just want somebody with maybe a little bit more ambition and a little bit more skill, perhaps. But I do think that the Wachowskis, when they do well, I like the sense of uplifting quality in their movies towards the end. No matter what's going on in the movies, a lot of times they'll find a way to really bring out the positivity in the end of it. And I thought that was really handled very well here. The way it chose to look at this whole mosaic of all these different people, all these like threads through time and all of these relationships, how we feel the same emotions over and over and over again through time, like it just reverberates. We connect, we disperse. There's harmony one moment, there's chaos another moment, and yet we keep repeating ourselves through history. It's not the most brilliant way to handle the themes, and yet I found myself really going for the positivity of it and really just impressed with the cohesiveness of everything. So while it's not perfect at all, certainly, and I think there are other people who could make it, I would like to see other people attempt it. This is a really, an interesting starting point. Next, I'm going to talk about Emma from 2020. There have been several Emma versions in pop culture, and this is just the latest one. Of course, it's based on the Jane Austen novel of the same name, and it is an English period piece of sorts. As a kid, I have a huge background with the Jane Austen movies. As a little girl, I was obsessed with them. I don't know why, really. I think I was just really interested in adults because they seemed so strange to me. And I was very interested in the way they spoke to each other and the way they handled each other. It just seems, still to this day, it seems quite strange to me. And there's something about how civil and how socially aware everybody has to be in those movies that I guess as a little girl, I found very interesting. Even though very adult conversations, I don't really know what they're talking about, I found myself hooked. When I was 6 years old, Sense and Sensibility was my favorite movie of all time. Whatever. But Emma was right along with it. I was absolutely obsessed. I saw the 90s version, the one with Gwyneth Paltrow. I saw that one probably 80, 90 times. And so naturally all I can see is the Gwyneth Paltrow one just flashing before my eyes as I'm watching this new one, unfortunately. Just, you see a movie so many times that happens. And I do like the 90s version. I think that the performances are really good in it. I thought Gwyneth Paltrow was very good. It's a different interpretation than Anya Taylor-Joy, but very good. But I always knew absolutely it could be made better. Sense and Sensibility is Ang Lee. It's very cinematic and it has all that. And Emma just felt more like a 90s movie that went like straight to VHS or something like that. I always knew it was capable of being made into a really compelling piece, and here we are. We've made it. It just took many years, but 2020's Emma, starring Anya Taylor-Joy, I thought was absolutely fantastic. By far the best interpretation of the Emma story because it understood the humor the most. It understood the self-awareness of this particular society. It takes that genteel, very rigid behavior that you're constantly seeing, and it turns it into a comedy of manners that is much more clever, much more aware than the rest of the films from the past. It is the humor of civility that is just sparkling throughout this movie. Sparkling. The wit, at times it's very frothy, and other times it really sinks its teeth in. And I just love that, like, every line feels like a treat, like you're going in for a handful of like macaroons or something. Tonally, it's just right on. It's really well paced, and it reminds me of a lot of those great, maybe George Cukor films. Like, it gave me a feel to that, but with a real pungence to it at the same time. Acting's wonderful. I absolutely loved Anya Taylor-Joy in this, and I really liked Mia Goth as Harriet. I thought she gave a really wonderful, naive performance that was very heartfelt. Visually so striking. This might be one of the most visually striking Jane Austen novel interpretations to film that I have seen, at least in a very long time. And one thing that I loved about this new one, that they corrected from the 90s Gwyneth Paltrow version, was the climax. I'm not going to get too much into it because I don't want to, talk about spoilers too much, but there was something that really bothered me in the original film, where you have an A story and a B story, and it's very necessary that they converge together perfectly at the climax. That's what the humor is, and that's just like, it's all leading to that point. And it misfires in the original. It's like you have the big climax, and then the next one, and then the next one, and it just doesn't work tonally. Here, they completely corrected it, and they brought it perfectly, and it was wonderful. Before, it was just like, oh, there's some strange editing going on here. This scene should have gone here. That's kind of what I felt. But this one, it just, it got it. It totally understood it. Very nice climax. And it worked, very satisfying. And finally, I saw 8 Mile, starring Eminem. I had never seen this movie. I know. But I watched it with a friend who thought it was weird I had never seen it, so he made me. And it was solid. I don't know if I would return to it, but I did enjoy it for what it was. And as I'm watching the movie, it had an energy to it that reminded me of a lot of certain Hollywood movies. It had like a tradition of like the classicist style filmmaking. So as I'm watching it in my mind, I'm like, this has like a Curtis Hanson sort of feel. And then I find out it is him, and I'm like, yes. But yeah, it is very Hollywood naturally because of that. And, that there's a lot of benefits to that, in that it's balanced, it moves very well. And it certainly has its moments, and it really kind of gives us an insight into, somebody like Eminem and that creative mind and where they come from. But it never really pushes that far. It always feels still a little too glossy Hollywood for my taste. And I wouldn't say that it feels really that authentic in terms of the reality that it's portraying. It's just too staged, and the performances are very actory. I don't believe that a lot of these people actually come from this particular world. I didn't feel that relentless energy and that adrenaline pumping and that violence that I do think is very necessary to really give us the grit and the life of this world, as I said. But Curtis Hanson, was an old dude, and I wouldn't expect him to be super bold in depicting rap battles in a movie like this. But again, what we do know is that Hanson is a solid filmmaker, and he makes very Hollywood-style movies that are, sophisticated, and often that's due to his ensembles. LA Confidential, of course, has a brilliant ensemble. And while I do struggle, again, with a lot of the very stagey type of performances here that don't feel authentic, I do think that a lot of the core ensemble is actually really good. Eminem at the center is fantastic. I'm not sure how I feel about Kim Basinger as his mother in the movie. I like the sections with his mother. They're very, very important to the film. But I almost feel like I wanted a different performer here. Somebody maybe just a little bit more dangerous and edgy, from an actress like maybe Melissa Leo or something. Michael Shannon, of course, Be Still My Heart. He's fantastic. And Brittany Murphy, has a real air of freshness and spontaneity to her that I think the film really needed. But yeah, it's solid. It's semi-autobiographical, absolutely, when it comes to Eminem. And I think when it came to really respecting who he is and just kind of his creative process, they got that right. And they understood to an extent the balance of the story, because it's not super cheesy or super silly when it absolutely could have been. There are so many movies and so many directors that, if they have a rapper at the center, it's almost like they're making fun of them. They don't quite respect them. And I think there is a lot of respect for Eminem here, and that's very important. They took it seriously. Giving us a taste of it, I just really, really wish they had gone further. But, it is what it is, and I am happy that it exists. Of course, if nothing else, we have Lose Yourself. But yeah, so those are just a few movies that I've watched over the last few months that I never got around to reviewing, but here they are if you want a little insight into what I thought about it. But yeah, thank you guys for watching the video. So I want to give a shout out to my patrons who have been wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch my videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.